All right. I'm Vanessa Lowe. I am the host of Vanessa's Money Hour on G-Town Radio. I also host this program, Financing Philadelphia's Future. We've been doing this for quite a while now, trying to do it once a month. What's the best way to watch? Set your screen for speaker view using the icon on the top right of your screen. It helps you to see best both the speaker and maybe some people on the side. Enter your questions in the chat. We will be taking those questions. It's a quick half-hour show, but we love as many questions as possible, so we will try to take as many as we can. Also, when you put that in the chat, tell us what part of the city you're from, and if you are not already on our mailing list, let us know if you want to be on the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition mailing list to get notifications of this, and give us your email. So there we go. All right. Welcome, everyone. All right, there we go. We have Professor Backer's face on the screen. So let me go to my introduction. Professor David Backer, he's a professor of education policy at Westchester University who focuses on issues pertaining to school financing. His recently published research with co-author Kamika Royal covering school financing over the 28-year period from 1993 to 2021 is what we're going to talk about today. The provisional results of the research that they did calculates that significantly less money for capital expenditures was actually used by the school district of Philadelphia than the school district actually obligated itself to repay through the municipal bond financing. Backer argues that, quote, Philadelphia schools are toxic because their financing has been toxic. I will turn it over to Professor Backer and let you introduce yourself a little bit and jump into that compelling statement.
Great. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you, everyone, for being here and for having me, for Peter, for the invitation, and for the group's attention to this. I just have a few prepared remarks. On the occasion of the School District of Philadelphia announcing a study of school closures and coming off a start to the school year where more than 60 buildings needed to close in the heat, I'll start by underlining the importance of profoundly assessing the structures involved in school facilities finance. And by structures, I mean regimes of policy in which our public governments, like the district, are caught up and with which they must interact to get the resources that they need to serve their diverse working class communities, such as we have in Philadelphia. By assess, I mean not only subjecting these regimes of policy to traditional analysis, but beyond that, critical analysis. And this is what myself and Kamika Royal did with our paper called Toxic Finance. The paper takes a concept cherished by neoliberals, efficiency, and turns it back on the private credit markets that supply the public schools with revenue for their infamously unsafe and toxic facilities. In the paper, we make a mixed methods argument that the toxic buildings result from a toxic financing. And it's not necessarily their expenditure, as though it's their responsibility necessarily. We're actually coming to the district's defense to some degree by doing some quantitative analysis of the efficiency of the municipal bond market. And then we do some financial history tracing a volatile story from the 1986 Tax Reform Act to the 1987 Savings and Loan Crisis and its impact on state and local governments, the follies of Paul Vallis's administration and its use of variable rate instruments in the early 2000s for district facilities finance, and then consequent losses and extreme austerity in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. We find that the municipal bond market regime is an inefficient and therefore toxic means of financing school infrastructure during this period. And we advocate public resources for public schools through a national infrastructure bank and a Green New Deal for schools to properly fund the facilities. But just concluding, I'll mention that I've gotten very helpful feedback about the quantitative findings of the paper since this group invited me. So the paper was published, and then in the paper's reception, I've gotten a ton of feedback. I've been made aware that in the original publication, some of the quantitative findings were flawed, and I'm currently in the process of fixing those mistakes in conversation with a number of colleagues. Among the precise issues I'm studying with the help of others, and I'd love to get your all feedback on this, is whether we can measure revenue for capital expenditure with net bond principal as reported on bond statements. whether this can be reasonably compared with capital expenditure over a 30-year period for the school district, whether tax revenue anticipation notes could be included in those calculations, and a few other questions like how to actually assess what the interest payments are given the amortization of the loans, et cetera. But I'm currently involved in conversations right now looking at the numbers, and I'm going to submit some corrections to the journal for the paper. But I still stand by the argument, and I'm learning a lot as I go. So thank you again.
Thank you, David. And I know we're going to have some questions coming in, but I want to sort of start by grounding us in this is, Financing Philadelphia's Future, a group that's been doing these shows since we had been working initially on creating a public bank. And we're still working on that. And we bring experts like you on to talk about things that address how do we finance things that are really important for Philadelphia, like affordable housing and schools. And so it sounds like what we're looking at here is the issue of the cost of that lending that they use, that type of lending that they use, is just eating away at what they could use to actually use in the schools. And so hopefully we'll get some good questions and comments about then how might that look if we had a Philadelphia public bank and we're using that to finance. Any initial thoughts before I go to Peter for questions?
Yes, just following up on your point, I want to just pull up a quick list of the different kinds of costs that come along with municipal bond market lending for the school district of Philadelphia and school districts around the country. I just wanted to list them for everyone's, just to let them linger, because it's quite, like we say costs and we say fees, but we don't appreciate the sort of magnitude of this, which is where I believe this problem is coming from. So, and this comes from a report by a researcher named Mark Jaffe, who studied the cost of school bonds, and he just listed these out. There's an underwriter's discount, financial or municipal advisor, consultant fees and expenses, bond counsel fees and expenses, underwriters counsel fees and expenses, rating agency fees, bond insurance premiums, verification agent fees, trustee fees, cost of issuance agent fees, paying agent fees, escrow agent fees, printing fees, QSIP fees, contingency costs, other costs or fees paid to state treasurers, payments to an attorney general, costs associated with municipal employees' time working on issuance, and appraisal fees. And those all might not apply to every single bond, okay? But that is what Jaffe found when he studied school district bonds and the kinds of things that they have to pay in terms of expenses. And I'll note just one last point that in a recent bond, I believe it's the most recent bond that's publicly available in the electronic municipal market access dashboard for the school district of Philadelphia, there was a sum of about $715,000 paid to Eckert Siemens just for consulting on issuance costs. And if we're talking about a 30-year period, those kinds of things add up. And I don't think that we would have to pay those fees if we were in a more public situation. And I don't think that the buildings would be in the shape that they are if over the last 30 years we didn't have to.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter, I'm going to go to you because I know we have at least one question.
We've got lots of questions because this is such a rich report. David, let me start by asking whether what you have found is specific to Philadelphia, or since this is a problem that seems to occur nationally, is this something that can be applied not just in Philadelphia, but across the country?
Well, so I'm in what I'm imagining to be a very initial stage of like a larger project of studying school bonds from the perspective of efficiency in this way. And so I don't actually have detailed numbers district by district to compare to the ones that I found in Philadelphia. It's been enough work just to figure that much out. But I do have an interest in undertaking a project that would compare school districts in different states with different school infrastructure financing policies at the state level to be able to see, these differences. I can tell you from initial numbers, and these are, I haven't done like a controlled study, with trying to account for omitted variables and the like, but just looking at a correlation between from national numbers, school district capital outlay, which is the amount that the school districts are spending on their capital programs, when you compare that to debt outstanding by district, it's orders of magnitude more debt outstanding than there is capital outlay. I know I have numbers from 2005 until 2021, and to me that indicates that there's a there, right? That there's something going on with the relationship to debt and the capital programs of school districts and their situation across this. Those are national numbers, but again, I need to do more work.
So, David, while we're talking about all these fees that you listed, the different kinds of fees and so on, Walt McCree asks if there are any associated fees that are confidential or not released to the public for review. So could there be some additional fees uh, beyond the ones that have been publicly identified?
I think it's a very occult piece of information. The exact kinds and number and quantity of fees that a public school district will pay for private credit. These things are not well listed in public bond statements. They're not necessarily broken down in an itemized fashion for a document like a school district budget, or there sometimes can be some itemization in audited financial statements. The closest I've been able to come to being able to parse these things is if I go in to the school district's spreadsheets for expenditures for the year that a bond was issued. I can search I don't know if it's thousands. I think it's thousands different little expenditures that the school district has and search for things that are related to bonds. But this is an arduous kind of task, if you can imagine it. And now, if you think about trying to do that for bonds going back to 1993 or beyond, it's intimidating. But I think it needs to be done. It really does need to be done. I happen to know, like a case in Yonkers, for instance, where there was a specific kind of fee paid on the resale of a bond on a kind of market by a certain set of consultants, that when it was found by federal regulatory agencies, they were able to bring suit against them. And then we can get some information, that there's been some wrongdoing. We know how much money, went back and forth, but we're talking about millions of dollars in the case of that Yonkers bond. So it's out of view. I mean, the whole way in which school buildings are financed in this country is out of view. I mean, you tell people who even know about taxes and operating expenditures that, school districts, that you can look up your public school district on a Bloomberg terminal if you've got $30,000 for the subscription, and you can figure out that you can invest in it as a commodity. People's eyes, they become saucers. They can't believe it. But that's, first of all, that's largely, hidden from view. But then once you start digging through all of the specifics, which I've only been able to do somewhat in studying this matter for, a number of years that I've studied it, there's so much to uncover here. And, this I feel is just the kind of beginning.
So this what we think of as a public good is really a source for private profit.
Well, yes, that's the thing. I mean, I think there's been a lot of research, in the literature about neoliberalism and the privatization of public schools. And the story usually goes something like, well, in the 1970s, it was the end of Keynesianism, you had stagflation, and then you had Reagan, and da. But this is how school buildings have been financed in this country for way longer than that. And I'm studying the history. There's no history of the school bond. Really, there are certain specific school districts and talking about school bonds, or there's economics research or finance research on them. But to general history of the school bond, I'm putting one together for a guest lecture now. And I think that the regime has sort of changed. I think there was a time in which school districts, they went into debt from private banks and more local sources until I think around 1913, when there was the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. And then there began a regime of banks that were the main lenders, rather than like a conduit. And then the Tax Reform Act of 1986, I think, ends the regime of banks, and then households and mutual funds with banks as conduits, and investment banks become more hegemonic. But I don't know; it's all very provisional. But and I don't mean to ramble at you, but the answer to your question is these public goods have been the basis for private profit for perhaps over a century.
So, in trying to get hands around or our minds around the scope of what this is, um, uh, Deb Figert asked the question about, what is the efficiency of the current way of financing school infrastructure through bonds? For every dollar of money approved or allocated, what percentage, for each dollar, how many cents actually go to some kind of an infrastructure improvement or a school building. And I know that you had preliminary results that were quite striking.
Yes.
Where do they stand now?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the story of this. So initially what we found was that it was 43 cents for every dollar. Shockingly, uh, uh, tragically low. But as the paper circulated and I heard more from those who know about this issue and whose opinion I trust, and also some trolls who I also listen to, even though I try not to take them too seriously, I think I definitely know that I made a mistake in including refunding bonds in the data set that I was using for that bond principle. And refunding bonds are more like a refinancing than a taking on of added summative debt to the situation. So when we take the refunding bonds out of my analysis, and also I figured out that my inflation adjustment was off in my calculations. So I went back to the numbers, and I've had, I think I'm going to be having my sixth or seventh conversations with colleagues across the country, study public finance and school bonds. I have them look at my numbers. We're going through this. When you take the refunding bonds out, what I've found is that it's 56 cents, not 43. But there's also tax revenue anticipation notes, which are a different kind of bond. Okay, there's a general obligation bond, which is the sort of long-term debt that one takes on. But the tax revenue anticipation note is a more short-term instrument that funds all kinds of things. Operating expenditures, fills kinds of gaps that you might have. And when you take out the tax revenue anticipation note, it becomes 83 cents. And I think there are people out there. I get pretty spirited emails from some folks who say that you can't measure what I'm trying to measure. You can't do it the way I'm trying to do it. And I took care of the quant side of this paper. Kamika did not, and I just want to I apologize to her, and I'm full transparency there. But I think there's something here. I've also talked with colleagues who say, yeah, this is a way of doing this, even though it hasn't been done before. And so I'm still in the midst. Those are provisional numbers.
But does that indicate that it's the short term and the rollover financing that is making things so expensive? There's
Well,
a lot of interest charges.
the thing is, so there's the matter of the remaining sense, or the missing sense, although I found it very, I think, ideological and political about how one names the amount of money, the difference between the 83 cents, the 56 cents, and the dollar. Where'd that money go? And the original paper, I think, a fair critique of our initial paper was that there was not enough context around this particular residual sum or residual magnitude. And I think calling it missing money or misspent money puts the blame on the district. Okay, but I don't think it's the district's fault. The district's at fault for a lot of things. It's not completely blameless in the situation, I'm sure. However, I think that what's frequently lost in the emotional and enraged dialogue around the state of the school buildings, what's often lost in the back and forth between communities and the district is the structure of financing that the district exists within and has to contend with, particularly in a state like Pennsylvania, where there's barely any help. So, what I'm trying to do with understanding this residual sum is I'd like to call it foreclosed money. And what I mean by foreclosed money is that it was never available to the district to begin with. There's a concept in psychoanalysis called foreclosure, when we kind of mourn the loss of something we never had. And foreclosed money in this understanding, to me, is money that the district never could have had. That's what that money is.
So, David, is this foreclosed money is a wonderful meme. And is this something that is specific or exacerbated with respect to school financing, or is this something that is endemic to bond financing generally?
You know, what I would hypothesize or what I would speculate is that one could ask similar questions for anything that is financed through the municipal bond market, which happens to be, I think, of a number that I saw recently in a recent report, 73% of public infrastructure in the United States is financed in this way. If I'm not necessarily surprised that this kind of study hasn't been done, because the people who might undertake such a study wouldn't come at it from a critical angle. They just think, oh, this is how we provide liquidity for public goods in this country. But I don't, something about critical theory in the tradition that I come from, it says that we are committed to a search for the reasonable conditions of life, and we will not stand for anything that's considered normal or the status quo that should not be subjected to the lens of analysis. And this is something we need to subject to that analysis. And I believe water authorities, electric authorities, we should be looking at this. Is this an efficient way to do it? They love the technocrats and neoliberals, they love talking about efficiency. Okay, is it to me it doesn't seem like it.
So the bottom line for us is, what would it look like if the financing was done with a public bank instead, whether it's a local public bank or a pension fund or a national infrastructure bank or a national public bank that is dedicated to this particular purpose?
Yes, so that's what we advocate for, in the paper. There are proposals out there, and there are bills at the federal, but also at state levels. I know there's one in Illinois. I know there's one in Rhode Island that are calling for national infrastructure banks. And what this does, as far as I understand, and the details, the devil is in the details in these kinds of proposals. But as you all know, as the Public Banking Coalition knows, that when you have an entity that is able to get into the driver's seat of providing liquidity for public infrastructure that is publicly controlled, then what you have is a more public approach to the dollars and how they're appropriated, how they're allocated, how the credit is distributed if it's credit, or the grants are allocated if they're grants. You don't expose, and in our paper we talk about two different kinds of toxicities of toxic finance. We talk about a risk toxicity when the school district, like under Paul Vallis, engaged with these variable rate instruments in the early 2000s. But there's also an exposure toxicity. And an exposure toxicity is when you expose a public school district trying to provide public education to Black and brown communities, like in Philadelphia, to the cruel vicissitudes of the market. And you have nothing in between it. It's just an exposure. And I feel like the public banking proposals, the national infrastructure banks, in various ways, create that barrier and create a way of protecting and providing what aren't just public goods, but actually what some of the architects of the National Infrastructure Bank proposal call collective goods. Collective goods require patient capital that, when invested, doesn't fully pay out, so to speak, for generations and decades. And the people who invest are at a far distance removed from the benefits provided by the infrastructure that they're investing in. We don't have structures in this country that provide for that. Right now, it's all impatient capital for things that require patient capital, and I think we see the detriment of that kind of policy in our school.
The investment in school infrastructure, building and improving the facilities, is driven by the demands and vicissitudes of the market, the financial markets, rather than the needs of the schools.
That's right. That's right. Who are we serving? I think that what we could call the capitalists, they believe that the best way to allocate revenues for lumpy costs like infrastructure, and by lumpy I mean these are sort of one-time, infrequent kinds of costs that come, not like your regular operating expenditure, but rather what is required for capital programs. I think they think that the best way to provide that credit is and resources is through credit, number one, indebting the public entities that have to provide this infrastructure. And number two, they believe that the best way to do it is to incentivize millionaires and billionaires to get fixed returns on investment through private institutions with all the bevy of consultants, et cetera, to be able to provide those resources. But I think they're wrong.
Well, we're going to have a good time continuing this conversation after the recorded session stops. But before I turn this back over to Vanessa, and before you get the last word, David, I want to thank you very much for all the work that you've done within our community and for the Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition. I know that you are no longer going to be a candidate, eligible to be a candidate for appointment to the initial board of directors of the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority because you're taking a new academic position in New Jersey at Seton Hall. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. It's a bittersweet thing to be able to have to take myself out of the running for that position. But I do appreciate your well wishes, and I'll still be around. So I'm still be talking about Philadelphia, even though I'll be right next door.
You're still in the neighborhood, and we're going to still be, calling on you for your expertise, not only in Philadelphia but nationally.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Vanessa, I turn it back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, David. So here's how it works these days with our Financing Philadelphia's Future. It is 4:57, so we've got 3 more minutes, but we will turn the recording off and continue the conversation with anybody who wants to stay on once 5 o'clock comes. Join us here every month. Again, I saw one person who did put their information in the chat if you want to join the mailing list. And keep putting those questions into the chat because, again, we're going to continue the conversation afterward. So, David, thank you so much for being here. Part of what I was sort of, the words unintended consequences sort of came to me, which is a phrase that we use, or I feel like I've used in sort of the foundation when it's like, you think you're doing something good, right? And so you invest in it and then you realize, oh, wait, this is actually hurting the community. So it sounds like this way of capitalism, and I'm not somebody who's like down with capitalism, but
sure.
But yeah, putting this kind of pressure on building schools and having secure schools for students to expose it to the problems of the capital markets is creating unintended consequences, it feels like.
Yes, I think that's a way of putting it. I don't think people are out there kind of like, oh, we want to make money and we want the schools to fall apart. Like I don't think people are out there doing that necessarily, but I do think that when you commoditize something like public education, what that does, to draw from like some old Marxist language, is it puts out of sight. When you make something into an exchange value, you put out of sight its material properties, and you think more about the exchange value of that entity than its real material existence. And the system that we have just puts the public schools, the buildings themselves, out of sight, and puts communities out of sight. If that's an unintended, I don't know. It's sort of an unconscious feature of the system, I think.
Yeah, and maybe we can do some more things about it. Stay on with us. We have now reached the end of this show, but again, we're here pretty much every month on the last Tuesday. Big thank you to Professor David Backer for joining us today.
Thank you.